So welcome everybody to this first session of NGOs and civil society. And this first session is devoted to the impact of climate change, of populations, so the human impacts of climate change in cryosphere regions. As I said this morning, when Olivier gave me, Ambassador Poivre d'Arvor gave me the floor, it is very important that alongside the scientific community, civil society engages also, because we are all the victims of what is happening, and what is happening much more severely in the cryosphere than elsewhere. But we are not only the victims, we are also the actors. And so we must act all together to fight as much as it's still possible against these phenomena, even if we know, and notably through what the scientists have told us this morning, we know that already a lot of impacts are irreversible. However, we can still limit these impacts. I will not be long. I wish to thank you for being here. I wish to thank the French authorities, and especially Olivier Poivre d'Arvor, for having left a room to NGOs and civil society in general. And I thank very much our speakers for being with us, coming from, you will see that, different regions of the world, the Himalayan region, the Andean region, the Arctic region, and some are coming from the United States of America, and others are coming from the Czech Republic. And I hope I don't forget some of you, and please forgive me if I do. Our first speaker is Pam Person, and we have already listened to her this morning. Pam is a diplomat, a very experienced diplomat, but at a certain time she decided that she could do even better than being a diplomat and engage herself for the protection of the cryosphere. And she's among the first persons to have encompassed the cryosphere as a general question and not in a partial manner. So, Pam, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am going to be even briefer than the 10 minutes allotted, because we're happy to have some representation now from Bolivia and Argentina. And so I'm going to gallop through these slides, but I thought it was important to touch on all of the aspects of cryosphere for this group, to bring it all together, because this is a really important year in terms of the global stocktake that is going to take place at COP28. It is the first stocktake under the Paris Agreement. And we feel that from the point of view of cryosphere and climate policy, it's important to actually say that if we're going to define well below 2 degrees, which is what the Paris Agreement says, with efforts to pursue 1.5, that based on what we know about cryosphere today, 2 degrees is too high. That's a simple message, but we need to define well below 2 degrees as 1.5. And as you heard in the previous session, those of you who were here, we need to pursue efforts to go even farther down. So, ice sheets. This is Earth's past, and we know these. You know, I'm going to try and stand up. Can people hear me okay? Can the translators hear me okay if I stand up like this, or is that going to make it too difficult? Okay, I'm going to sit down then, but I have a hard time seeing my own slides. You have seen this dotted line already today, and one message from ice sheets experts is that there are more and more studies coming out that point to this dotted line here that are taking into account more kinds of ice processes. And those, as we get much more sophisticated, in other words, what was thought as a low likelihood event is seeming more and more plausible. This is one of those studies from this year, and as you can see, if you look at this slide, it is only the blue line, which is very low emissions, that seems to stabilize the ice sheets, even what used to be called low emissions, RCP 2.6, which peaks at 1.8 degrees. You see a very slow rise in sea levels. That tracks with what a paleoclimatologist would tell us. So I'm clicking through here. Okay. But again, we can change this by acting now if we act in time. This is Antarctica alone. One of these studies that came out in 2021 shows that we could get 10 meters from Antarctica if these processes are correct. Okay. And again, this is somewhat controversial among ice sheet scientists, but at the same time, there are other studies that are looking at other ways the ice behaves that show similar things. And this is the human impact, and that's what's so important. And I actually had to give this presentation with the foreign minister of the Bahamas sitting next to me, which I was not aware of. This is 1 meter, okay? This could happen as early as 2070 with current emissions, but this is 3 meters, and it basically wipes out the Bahamas early next century. And that is where we're headed with our current emissions right now. Glaciers and snow, you'll hear quite a bit from Dr. Pama later on about the impact on 2 billion people in the HKH region. These are older slides. When the State of the Cryosphere report comes out a little over a week from now, these will be updated. But you can see the big difference between low emissions and high emissions, and it makes the difference in places like the Alps between no ice and some ice and even a bit of ice recovery. This is a really good animation that shows this. As this runs through, you'll see that there's almost no difference because of all the heat already built into the system until about 2060. But when you get to 2060, they really start to move apart. And by the time you reach 2100, as you see here, there's a huge difference. This is the largest, highest glacier in the Alps. Tropical glaciers, one of the good news of the more recent projections is that these can actually be preserved even at 1.5 degrees, which is good to know because we used to have to say to people in tropical regions, like Bolivia, for example, that their glaciers could no longer be preserved. It looks as though 1.5 can do that. And high altitude and latitude glaciers, like in the HKH or in the Arctic region, for example, they're very slow to get started, but once they start, it's very, very difficult to stop them, in that they behave like ice sheets. And we should not forget snow, because for water resources, it's snowpack that's more important, actually, rather than glaciers. But both are seasonally important in a lot of regions. Polar oceans is something that does not get enough attention, and our main focus is acidification, because the higher the CO2 in the atmosphere, the more rapid the acidification in the world's oceans. But what isn't well understood by most of the general public is that it's the polar oceans that have absorbed maybe 60% of the CO2 that's been absorbed by the world's oceans. Chemical reasons for that, in part because these are colder waters, but this is the kind of damage that was already being seen in the Arctic and around the Antarctica and the Southern Ocean already in the 2000s. That shell damage is spreading. We're seeing more and more of it, and that really threatens the entire food system, especially when you add the impacts of freshening, because the ice sheets are melting, so the waters are becoming more fresh. And of course, warming. There have been extreme marine heat waves just in this past year. And when it comes to CO2, it's really important to pay attention to how off the charts we are. This was also spoken about in the previous presentation. You know, between glacials and interglacials for the past 3 million years, we went between 180 and 280, and this is where we are right now, 424 this year. We're now 50% above pre-industrial. This is just outside, not just of human experience, but of planetary experience over at least the last 3 million years. And this is what a high emissions world would look like in the polar oceans. Where that is red, the waters are too corrosive for shelled life. And this is actually, in many ways, even scarier in some ways than what we see with ice sheets, because acidification lasts 50 to 70,000 years. If we minimize it, like in the blue lines, then it will recover much more quickly. But otherwise, we're looking at threats for things such as cod, salmon, krill, really important keystone species. And permafrost, I mean, not just 2 degrees is too high. We're losing permafrost already today. It really decreases the the carbon budget for anthropogenic emissions. And you need to think about permafrost almost as a country. And we already have a level of around Japan today. By 1.5, it would be similar to India today. But it can go up to being a major emitter if we get to, say, 4 degrees by the end of this century. And it's a matter of intergenerational justice, because permafrost, we're not worried about a methane bomb or a CO2 bomb from permafrost. The story of permafrost is that it keeps on emitting for 1 to 2 centuries after that initial thaw. So that means that we are committing future generations to offset what we set in train. And then sea ice, we heard a lot last time. This is a view that would normally have almost completely covered in sea ice in the Bellingshausen Sea this past year. Antarctic sea ice set 2 records, one for winter extent, one for summer extent. It really should not look like this, where the first ice you see is basically on the continent. And Arctic sea ice, the latest projections show that only very low emissions, the one on the left, can really stabilize this. So we have decreasing sea ice with rising CO2. Some of the latest projections that I heard about just in the last session is that we might actually still have some sea ice going up to 2 degrees. That is good news. That's because it's sort of leveled off, but we will see what happens going forward. So this is just sort of the summary of all of these. I will make these slides available to people. And it's really important to say that we can still limit close to 1.5 degrees. What we're waiting for is our own actions. So thank you. I apologize for the gallop, but I really want to give time for our special guests. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pam, for your impressive. Okay, pas de problème. So, thank you very much, Pam, for your really impressive presentation and your wonderful work on the cryosphere. I was in COP21. Well, actually, I was in Rio in 1992, but that's another story. And I was in COP21 heading the WWF European office, and we had one main objective. Our main objective was to obtain the mention of the limitation of temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, because a lot still can be saved if we are able to limit the rise of temperature to 1.5 degrees. And you confirmed this point today. So there is hope. We can act, and we must limit the rise of temperature to 1.5 degrees. So that's the main lesson I would, in a very simplified manner, get from your very rich presentation. Now, I will give the floor to Jan Dušik, and Jan is precisely heading the WWF Arctic program, and he has been extremely active during the preparation of our recommendation that you will discover on the website of the summit, I guess tomorrow, hopefully. So please, Jan, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Geneviève. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And I promise I will not add statistics and graphs, because I think that Pat covered the science. I will focus more on the relationships and what it implies in the Arctic and for the Arctic. This is based on the fact that the Global Arctic Program of WWF existed since 1992. We are active in a number of partnerships in the Arctic, and we have just now finalized a strategy where we want to see the Arctic in 2030. And what you see on the screen is our vision. of a well-managed region that is biodiverse, that is resilient, and that is capable of supporting healthy ecosystems, as well as populations of wild species, and importantly benefiting the well-being of people in the Arctic and beyond. So we are clearly taking a holistic and broader perspective, and I will go a bit deeper into that. Do you have the remote control, please?
Sorry.
So we quite often hear the slogan, what happens in the Arctic? And then we know that it follows, doesn't stay in the Arctic. But let's stay in the Arctic for the moment. And we are seeing that we are reaching or have already reached some of the climate tipping points, and there are serious global implications of the disappearance of cryosphere in the Arctic. We hear from the science that there are specific important impacts related to the Arctic amplification, the role of the ocean acidification, and also the impact of the Atlantic waters coming into the region. So it's again, it shows the connections and also the importance and magnitude of the processes which are happening in the Arctic. And the clear message is that if we are now talking about globally what happens with climate, with greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, it's going to be too late in 2050 to take action. So planning for 2050 is too late. We need to focus on much shorter horizons. Clearly, the climate change is the biggest stressor for the Arctic biodiversity. Some of the species are and will be increasingly moving north. Some of them will be affected by the disappearance of ice, that they will no longer have their habitats, and there will be a severe disruption of the food webs in between the species in the food web. But what happens in the Arctic sometimes also originates in the Arctic, and we have a number of economic activities. It's not an isolated region, and I've pointed the most important ones here. And you can see that what is also sometimes called as the Arctic paradox, the Arctic is contributing to the global greenhouse gas emissions through drilling of oil and gas, obviously through burning of oil and gas, which happens in different parts of the world. The mining has important implications in terms of fossil fuels, but also other impacts. Shipping is at present highly polluting, part of it related to tourism, part of it relating to fishing. There are other impacts of tourism and fishing than greenhouse gases. So there is an impact. Of course, there is a when we speak about the overall greenhouse gas emissions and concentrations, there's a much bigger impact coming onto the Arctic from the global side, but Arctic is also contributing to the problem, and that's what we need to recognize. The Arctic is opening as the ice disappears, but we should ask several questions with it. First, who is benefiting from that opening? Who will be benefiting from opportunities that are coming up? Who will be paying the costs of, or the environmental costs, the society costs of these openings? And are we exercising enough precaution? How do we fill? How do we recognize the knowledge gaps? How do we work with them? The Arctic is also a homeland. It's a homeland of 4 million people, about 500,000 of which are of indigenous origin. They have their livelihoods, they have their needs of food security, they have their cultural ties to the region, to the environment. They are used to living with the nature. They understand the processes in the nature. They are observing the climate change and its effects. And they also need their local economies. And there is always a choice between the economies. Are we more going on the extractive path, or are we bringing in increasingly the conservation and the resilience building, adapting to climate change, and more focusing on a relationship with nature? Nature needs space to adapt is our conclusion. There is a range of instruments that are already in place. Some of them are recently adopted, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework or the High Seas Treaty, that are dealing with both protection of part of nature and the sustainable use of the rest of the nature. The Arctic Council has produced a wealth of knowledge in the past and hopefully also into the future. The Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement is an interesting instrument that takes a holistic approach to the question whether in the future it will be possible to do commercial fishing in the high seas of the Central Arctic Ocean. And there is a range of instruments adopted in the area of shipping, the Polar Code, the regulation of pollutants such as heavy fuel oil use or black carbon. There is a growing understanding of how voyage planning can reduce the environmental impacts. There's also important and increasing recognition of how the conservation done by the indigenous peoples can be part of the solutions that can help address the problems. One particular area worth mentioning is the Pikiala Sorek on the border of Greenland, in between Greenland and Canada, and that's potentially becoming a marine protected area. So we have quite a few measures, but the point that I want to conclude with is that none of these, or not the combination of these, will not suffice if we will not stop climate change, if we let it go too far. And concluding where Pam also concluded that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming is the ceiling which we can still afford for a manageable change in the Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Indeed, you repeated what has to be repeated. Let's limit to 1.5, and it means a lot of efforts and a lot of conviction. You have demonstrated that Arctic suffers more than any other region from climate change, but also that Arctic contributes in a certain manner to climate change. And finally, that Arctic is home to 3 million people, and that these populations, especially indigenous population, have knowledge and traditions that can bring a lot to us. And now we will turn to Ole Olsvik, who is a Greenlandic entrepreneur born in Najat in the north of Greenland, and who some French people present here may know, as he has played his own role in several movies by French explorer Nicolas Dubreuil. And Ole, thank you for coming all the way to Paris and to share with us your testimony on the changes felt by the inhabitants of North Greenland.
Thank you. I'm honored and privileged to be here as well, to be invited and represent my people in North Greenland and in Greenland. I have named the presentation Inokafini Inuit because it means communities and its people. So I wanted to show again where I'm from, and I cannot see anything, so I have to...
Yeah, you can probably stand up. You can probably stand up.
Yeah. So where I'm from, there's approximately 45 people now, and used to be 70 people, and it's called Nayat. And you have to imagine there's no road infrastructures in Greenland. Hello? Hello. There's no road. Sorry.
You can stand. You can
Okay.
stand there. Please.
There's no road infrastructure, so you have to find your organic roads. In winter, we have Islamnit. It is sea ice, so you have dog sled trails. And in summer and around, before winter and after winter, you have to sail around the icebergs and ice. So you always have to find your way. And you can imagine we have the ice sheet, which is always calving, and you can see the formation of how much ice goes out. And you have to really depend on finding a way around. And there's commercial flights to villages, and you can see several of the villages. And the town of Upernavik has 9 villages, for example. And there's commercial shipping as well, and commercial flights are by helicopter to the villages. But my village, there's no commercial flights going in, so you have to go to the sail or take the dog sled trip to the closest villages. Yeah, I wanted to represent the humanity part. I talked a bit with the scientific side this morning. And I talk a bit also about that there's no shops, and we have something we call glaciers. We only use it in North Greenland because it is depending on where we are from, and it means that you have to go to other places, villages or towns, to buy your necessities. And there's no street lights, no road infrastructure, no post office, so you have to go to another village for that as well. And health, that you have to check in the towns. No fish storage, but the village survives from fishing and hunting, traditionally. Education and knowledge. So yeah, I presented this morning a bit about I came from the school in the middle, the blue one. It's named after my grandpa, and my mom is a teacher there. But it is really important to get to know other languages and maths and science in every village that you have. It doesn't matter how far away it is. Like, it is the start I got, and now I can like speak to you and communicate with you the way that I want to represent my communities. And I think the younger generations are the connection between the old knowledge and the new ways that we adapt to. This is a bit personal. I was hesitating a bit, but I really wanted to show like how it is. And this is my late grandma, and she made a gimmick, and she's telling stories about how it is made. And I have aunts now who are really good at making those gimmicks, and they are made with seal skin. And even all those, the colors, they are as well made with seal skin. And Davy, right beside, he's still alive, and he lives in Nayat. He's the brother of my grandma. And he tells a lot of all these stories that we had, how it was. Like, we have stories, you could take your ducks, sled ducking, so far away you cannot almost see the lands and islands, and you only have almost the sea ice. And those are not what I can experience now. Like, I grew up there, and I used to go duck sledding on with my dad. And there's only points that we can reach now. And this is a picture of my dad. And I just talked about the limited situation we have. Like, you can see those lands, it's nearby my village. And you have those lands that you can reach, but after that, in winter, you cannot even, there's not enough stable ice in those areas now. It is the change that has been like made in how many years now? 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you had those opportunities to do, and places where you can find your hunts and your traditional hunting places. Open sea is vast, but comes with reckless, unpredictable wind. And I talked a bit about polar nights this morning. When polar nights come and there's no stable ice, it is really dangerous. You're on a boat now and traveling around trying to find fish and animals, or even traveling to villages. With so much wind and reckless sea, it can be really dangerous. And for example, in 2019, my village, there was around 15 boats, and there's a huge iceberg which broke just before December. And it destroyed 13 boats, and there's only 2 which survived. One is my dad's, and the other one is another hunter. So they're good at helping each other. They fund each other, and this is how they survive. But there's those things that is happening with the nature that affect the Arctic deeply in those ways. Perhaps not a lot of people hear about. So we thrive in stability of ice. The communities have survived hardships in villages and settlements for centuries, and it has been like that for us. We have stories, or we have ancestors, oral stories that we keep, and how it has been. And my mother always tells me that nature gives you the energy which fully measureless way of life can give you. And this is one of core reasons that people live there, even if there's changes, technological changes, and perhaps technological benefits you have in bigger towns. And they say also, you can play away from Sila. Sila is weather. You can play away from nature. It's always there. You can be living in towns and big towns, but it will still affect you. And my parents have been asked, why are you living there? You have perhaps other opportunities in bigger towns. But this is what they say. You can play away from Sila. This is your community, and it has always been your community. So communities like Anayat want to adapt to changes. And I can reflect on other communities around in villages as well. And I hope it reflects us to other indigenous people who might be few in their communities, but they have strong bondage with nature. So they want to be understood for the way of life they live and be supported for it. And they want to communicate. And the last one, I will just read it. Our communities are the keepers of the knowledge on Sila in their respective areas. They want to be part of Silaswak by providing their knowledge and learn with you. Silaswak is the world. And it's for connection with everyone in the world. We're all following the path of nature, and we depend on it. We are walking beside Nanak on this, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ole, for having shared with us very personal pictures and also a lot of your traditional wisdom. And I think this can give us a lot of strength. Thank you very much. Now we will change our perspective, and we will go to the third pole, as Olivier Poivre d'Arvor likes to call it. I mean the glaciers. And for that, we will first listen to UNESCO expert Thales Carvalho Vicente, who has recently published an incredible report on World Heritage Glacier and the impacts of climate change on these. Dear Thales, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Before I start my presentation, I just wanted to screen a short video. It's a 1-minute video which sums up some important information. Okay, thank you very much. So as you could see, this short video gives some insights on what is happening in World Heritage Sites, glaciers in World Heritage Sites. So my name is Thales Carvalho Resende. I work at UNESCO, and today I'll be talking about glaciers and cultural heritage. I apologize in advance if I get a bit emotional during my presentation, but it's just that I learned a couple of hours ago that I will be a dad. So apologies if I get a bit confused during my presentation, sorry.
You can run because you have good reasons to run.
Thank you. So, glaciers in World Heritage Sites. Well, glaciers are some of the most valuable indicators for understanding climate change. There have around 19,000 of glaciers have been identified around the world, and around 10% of them are in World Heritage Sites. So there you can see the importance of World Heritage glaciers. And as you could see, they are retreating at an accelerated rate. And the glaciers in 1/3 of World Heritage Sites will disappear by 2050, regardless of the climate scenario. And this includes glaciers in all World Heritage Sites in Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro, for instance, as well as some iconic sites here in Europe, for instance, the Pyrenees, Mont Perdu, as well as the Dolomites in Italy, and also in the United States in Yosemite National Park. But there's a message of hope that limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees could save glaciers in 2/3 of World Heritage Sites. But something that I would like to stress here is thinking beyond let's say, the physical features of glaciers. Glaciers carry huge cultural and spiritual significance for many indigenous peoples and local communities. For instance, here you have a picture of Franz Josef Glacier, or Ka Roimata o Ukatere, which means the tears of Hine Hukatere. It's a World Heritage Site in New Zealand. And according to the Maori legend, Ine Hukatere, who's a Maori demigod, loved to climb these mountains and convinced her love, Wave, to join her on one of their climbs. During this climb, Wave was swept away by an avalanche, never to be seen again. Hine Hukatere was heartbroken, and her grief caused her to cry rivers of tears that flowed down the mountain and froze to form the glacier that stands today. This is a picture as well of the Koilurriti, or the Snow Star Festival in Peru. So every year, tens of thousands of pilgrims gather in the Peruvian Andes to celebrate this Snow Star Festival. This is a UNESCO intangible list, no? And this centuries-old event is a native celebration of the stars to mark the start of the harvest season, which is held to be sacred. And the spiritual leaders, they used to cut water, they used to cut blocks of ice from the glacier to share them with the other pilgrims, believing that the melted water had healing powers. However, they stopped doing this tradition after noting a decline in the glacier's size. So, indigenous peoples and local communities are on the front line of climate change, and they will be the first to experience its adverse impacts. The loss of glaciers is also a loss of iconic features in many mountain areas that has several tangible and intangible negative consequences for livelihoods, economies, and heritage. And World Heritage Sites offer a unique opportunity to recognize indigenous peoples and local communities as effective stewards of glaciers. So here it's a call for action that we would like to share with you a few points. Extremely important: identify knowledge gaps and improve monitoring networks. Monitoring strategies need to be more inclusive and proactively involve indigenous peoples and local communities. They should use co-production approaches, acknowledge the value of traditional research practices, and recognize local and indigenous knowledge systems. Design and implement early warning and disaster risk reduction measures. Local populations within and in the vicinity of many World Heritage Sites remain under-equipped, untrained, and uninformed about nearby glacial hazards. Make glaciers a focus of targeted adaptation policy. I guess this is one of the most important things. Well, my partner is a lawyer, and I learned from her that, well, in the end, it's always the lawyers who decide. And few countries possess, I would say, an adequate legal and regulatory framework or public policy to protect glaciers. No? For instance, Argentina, a couple of years ago in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the first countries that made a specific law for glaciers. And here, to finish my presentation, a call, as you might know, 2025 will be the International Year of Glaciers. This was a resolution passed by the United Nations in December last year, which invites UNESCO and the World Meteorological Organization to facilitate the implementation and develop activities for this International Year of Glaciers. So we are pretty much looking forward to exchange with all of you to make this 2025 International Year a landmark process for glaciers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thales, and congratulations for the great news. I guess you are you are impatient to discover the baby, so thank you very much for staying a bit with us. Like the other speakers, you have, of course, insisted on the necessity to stick to the 1.5 because 2/3 of the World Heritage Glacier could still be saved if we stick to this objective. You have a plan of action. We have to identify knowledge gaps. We have to monitor the situation. We have to take advantage of traditional approaches, but also to inform, train, and equip the populations. This is something that is valuable for every region of the world. Now we will turn our eyes towards the Himalayan glaciers, and I will give the floor to Sulanya Chattopadhyay. Sulanya is the founder of the Geography and News magazine, and also of a working group, Science and Geopolitics of Himalaya, Arctic, Antarctic, which reflects on the interlinkages between the three poles and how to address them. So, Sulanya, the floor is yours. And yeah, I have to remind to everybody that we have to try to respect our 5 minutes slots because unfortunately time is running fast and we want to listen to the last speakers.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I have it all written, so I will just read. So in the 2 decades, the Arctic is, of course, we've heard all of this, that it's going to be likely ice-free in summer. And the Himalayas, we have Western Antarctic, which is also melting. The Himalayas set for large-scale glacial depletion. And all these ocean currents that are going to be reversed and all of that, we've been listening to this. But the large and diverse population that inhabits the Himalayas reels under unprecedented flash floods. It's landslides blocking arterial transport links. There are gulfs, and there is increasing crescendo of these events, which is bringing to focus the deep vulnerabilities of the Himalayan region. So all is not fine in the Himalayas. And these changes, they are crying out for some concerted action. And I think science is what can lead through policy interventions. So while there's uncertainty, and we've heard a lot from the scientists that there are gaps, there's uncertainty in observational networks, there's, especially in the Himalayas. Now, so we know Western Himalayas well, but Eastern Himalayas is hardly covered. But we do know enough to ameliorate the strife of populace that inhabits these marginalized spaces. The world needs to move away from conflict and competitiveness of geopolitics, which are sullied by the likes of Hochschild, who brought geopolitique, to what Griffith Taylor termed geopacific, and a step further to science as a geopacifist or a science geopacifism. So we came together for the ODS through the Montreal Protocol, and despite stratospheric ozone not being an issue of concern for the tropics, we all came together to phase out the ODS. But the same can be done for carbon emission, which, unlike ozone, is uniformly mixed in the atmosphere across the globe. While ozone recovery, is on its way, carbon emissions is in the domain of bitter geopolitics. So we need to move away from that with science. For the people of the mountains, where we just heard that the lakes, the lakes hold the souls of their ancestors, and we have goddess Kali, who comes from the glacial meadows with spring flowers to the villages. These are all things that, herald climate change in the region, because these things are not happening the time they should happen. And so the people interpret this as a wrath of gods, and fettering their nature-inspired deities, which are like the rivers, the streams, the lakes with large dams, they say, has caused this apocalyptical kind of reality. For instance, the educated youth of the Lepcha community from the sacred Zongu in Sikkim and the Kinnaur tribals from Himachal are raising their voices against large dams and commodification of water. So while the development in the Himalayas and the kind of investments that have been made have augmented livelihoods, there's a lot of livelihoods that have come out of these investments, but there is a steady male-centric out-migration, and we have ghost villages. And although it's not all climate change, but it has resulted in this remittance-driven construction of homes, hotels, homestays, and communities across the Himalaya from Ladakh to Arunachal. They don't go for indigenous kind of construction anymore. So they have these brick buildings and they have modern concrete in very picturesque riverine locations, which are but prone to a lot of landslide damage and slope failure, and therefore the hazards. So Arctic is not so densely populated as the Himalayas, but the concerns of the indigenous people are similar. So there is loss of cultural ethos, there's a loss of traditional way of living, and the loss of identity as protectors of land, and these are the similar issues that resonate across all glacial regions. But the Himalayan communities are the forefront of climate crisis, with the glaciers being the first responders of this change, but they have no special status. So unlike the Sami or the indigenous Arctic communities, the Apatani, the Mishmi, the Bhutias, the Lepcha, the Ladakhi, the Kinnori, other communities of the Himalayas, they're not awarded any sub-governance position. They do not have an independent parliament. They are not represented or granted a chair in an international fora, such as the indigenous community are in the Arctic Council. So in my view, there is a three-pronged approach that we need. We need better science, we need better governance, and we need better interconnectedness through a science geopassivism framework. So if you remember, WAPRIC's plea for coordinated science cascaded into a series of pioneering occurrences, from IPY in 1882 to the AEPS, and then finally the Arctic Council, which illustrates how science is the universal language of humankind and can draw the mantle of being the peacekeeper. And there is no perhaps better example than the ATS, where science held the global commons for over 60 years, despite momentous geopolitical churnings all around. So in my view, a Himalayan Science Council, therefore under India's Neighborhood First policy with the Himalaya First outlook is imperative. We have something called the BIMSTEC, which I'm sure you're aware of the BIMSTEC, which interviews a Himalayan component, but it has a Bay of Bengal part, which kind of covers too many issues, because once the oceans come in, the Himalayas kind of loses, so it's not strictly Himalayan. And the organization I represent is SAGA. I've been working for 15 years in the cryospheric domain of Arctic, Antarctic, and Himalaya. We are the people who bring science and policy together. We have been instrumental, bringing a kaleidoscope interaction with governmental bodies and global audiences. And the outcomes, we have been part of the formulation of India's Arctic policy in 2022, and we have organized various chapters of SAGA, and the last one being in April 2022. So I end my submission here with a call for a science-led geopassivism, leading from a Himalayan Science Council to a one-window operational agency in the Himalayas that intertwines the multitude of bodies working in the Himalayas, treating the region in its entirety. I thank you for the opportunity to speak in this very eminent forum.
Thank you very much. Merci. Very good lessons from your experience. So we need science, but we need also science-based action, science-based governance, and that's what we are aiming for, all of us today. Now we have another intervention for your region, the Himalayan region. We have Pema Gyamtsho. Pema is the Director General of ICMOD, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, an intergovernmental center serving the countries of the Hindu-Kush Himalaya. Pema, you have the floor, and I am very sorry to insist on the fact that we need to stick to the 5-minute slot, because we have had the very good surprise to welcome two ladies coming from the Andean region who are there with us, and and who should, of course, be able to speak. So please, Pema.
Thank you very much. I will just run through my presentation. So I'm going to talk about the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, the region which is in a very, very critical stage. And I'm going to call on you to give attention to it, and also to leverage your scientific knowledge and your influence to raise investments and to raise awareness about this region. How does that work now? Sorry, cannot run. Okay.
Alors, Alexia, maybe you can help? Who can help?
Maybe up there? Doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Bravo.
maybe I'll use this one also. I'll use
Just say next, and it will work.
Right, it works better. Right, I'm going to talk a little bit about ICIMOD, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. I think by now everybody knows about that. We are actually an intergovernmental regional organization, and we have 8 member countries that have parts of the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain ranges. I think I don't need to go through the list of the countries. We are unique in the sense that we are not a research organization, so we do not have specialized scientists like many of you do. We are a research and development organization working at the interface between science, policy, and practice. But it's very important for all of us to appreciate what is happening in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. It's not about just the mountains. It's not about just the snow, the cryosphere. It's about people living in the river basins of the rivers that originate from the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. If you look at the dark areas, those are actually where the mountain ranges are. But if you look at the gray, the light blue areas, that is the total area that these mountain regions serve. Okay, so this is the geophysical feature of the region. I think we will not go into the details, but suffice it to say that we have 54,000 glaciers and having the largest reserve of frozen water outside of the 2 poles, outside of the Arctic and the Antarctic, and about 6,000 cubic kilometers of ice. That's why it's called the third pole. And so, this is, again, a region very rich in biodiversity, very rich in culture. But the most important thing is 10 of Asia's largest rivers originate from this region. And these rivers actually directly or indirectly support the livelihood of close to 2 billion people living both within the mountains as well as in the river basins downstream. So it's all about people. And the safety and security of these people are at the heart of whatever we do. Okay, but this region is also one of the most vulnerable regions to all the threats that we are facing now, the climate change, pollution, biodiversity, and also rapid changes in demography. About climate change, I think we have heard enough of this. The glaciers are melting, the snowfall patterns are changing, so all this I think you have heard before. And this is a picture of how the glaciers have changed over the years. In a period of 100 years, is one of the glaciers in the Himalayas. We have heard of the catastrophic floods in Pakistan in 2022. We have heard about this unseasonal and very heavy rainfall in Beijing. And I think the heaviest rainfall in the last 140 years. Just recently, just 2 months ago, we had this devastating flood in Sikkim, India. And of course, land degradation is taking place very fast. I think we have heard of this before. Also, not necessarily due to climate change, but also due to haphazard construction of roads, particularly. And then this is one of the main drivers of the main reasons why people are moving out of mountain settlements, drying springs, that's main source of drinking water. When they have no water, they have to move out. So pollution, again, this in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, along with the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is one of the most polluted regions in the world. is due to transport sector, and also wildfires we have heard of before. The pollution of water is still very rampant, and of course landfills are filling up and becoming actually a source of animal feed. So biodiversity loss, rapid land use changes is leading to loss of indigenous biodiversity species. Some of the, I think this is directly related to climate change. Jan from WWF talked about it earlier. Now the species from the tropical areas, warmer areas, are moving up to the colder and the alpine areas. So the Royal Bengal tiger here, for example, is moving into the habitat of snow leopards and displacing the snow leopards. Where would the snow leopards go? Just one example. And in terms of migratory birds, again, they may be conserved, protected in one country, but if they are not done in the same way in another country, they tend to go into extinction. Some of the examples of what we have done, we have come out with these landmark assessments, some of which you have already heard. I will not go through it. But the important thing is the previous assessment that we brought out in 2019 has estimated that even at 1.5 degrees Celsius world, it will be too hot for the Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers. 1/3 of the glaciers would disappear. The second assessment we did that even paints a more grimmer picture. We are likely to lose 80% of our glacial mass if we don't do anything. Some of these research and development interventions, we are working on disaster risk reduction, we are working on decision support tools, information, weather forecasting, drought forecasting, and so on. And Tenzin, my colleague, has already touched on what we are doing also with the glaciers, glacier monitoring, but here we are also talking about the tree line, the movement of tree line, the shift in tree line, and so on. And also we are trying to address, as I said, we are at the research and development phase, so we try to solve this problem of drying springs and shortage of water. So we are lifting water from the river. We are also trying to rehabilitate and revive some of these drying springs. I'll not go through all this. These are all known to you. Energy. And then one of the most important requirements is regional cooperation. So we are in the process of developing a high-level mechanism to bring the region together to cooperate at a much higher level than we are doing now. So I would like to conclude this statement by saying that when we talk about ice, we are talking about water. When we are talking about snow, we are talking about water. The discussion about cryosphere is about water. And water is life. Water gives life, water takes life. And I think adaptation, I think the work that is ahead of us is all about managing water. Too much water, floods, disasters, and loss of lives and property. Too little water, and it impacts food security, energy security. So I think we need to now get water on the table, which is ice, which is snow, which is cryosphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pema. It is extremely impressive. But at the same time, you are preparing the reaction, you are preparing the adaptation with disaster risk reduction, monitoring, and regional cooperation. So once again, it's a message of hope, science and action and cooperation. Now we have the pleasure and honor to welcome two ladies from the Andean countries, one from Bolivia and the other one from Argentina. So the first one, Maria Eugenia Choque Quispe, is from not only Bolivia, but from Aymara. And she has been the first woman from indigenous origin to chair the Supreme Court for elections in Bolivia. And she is also a recognized expert in the field of rights of indigenous peoples. And so, please, Maria Eugenia, the floor is yours. You will speak in Spanish, and what you will say will be interpreted, I think, towards French or towards English? French, towards French. So it will take time, and that's why I urge previous speakers to allow for Maria Eugenia, and also remember your Vanina Ojeda to speak, to be able to speak about their own experience. So please, Maria Eugenia.
Thank you so much. My name is Maria Eugenia Choque. I am from Bolivia. I am Aymara people. El tema que voy a hablar así de manera muy breve es sobre la situación que vivimos los pueblos indígenas, sobre todo la mujer indígena aymara frente a lo que es este proceso de la crisis climática y lo que fundamentalmente es el deshiele que afecta de manera directa como pueblos indígenas.
Je vais parler. Est-ce qu'on m'entend? Le micro ne marche pas. Si, merci. Je vais parler donc.
So I'm going to be telling you briefly about the situation of indigenous people, in particularly the Aymara women, and the climate crisis that we're experiencing, and the impact of the thawing of ice on our population.
Nosotros en Bolivia somos una mayoría indígena, sobre todo estamos ubicados en la parte andina, que quiere decir en la cordillera de los Andes, a los pies de las montañas de los Andes. La montaña de los Andes inicia desde el norte de la Argentina, cruza el Perú, Ecuador, llegando a lo que es la parte sur de Colombia.
Donc nous sommes en Bolivie.
So we live in Bolivia, and we indigenous people live in the mountains, but we live in the Andes, at the foot of the Andes, which start at the north of Argentina, which go through Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, and Bolivia.
Deshiele de nuestras montañas, que no solamente son las montañas, sino se constituyen en nuestras deidades. En Aymara es los uyuiris, son nuestros protectores, son pues aquellos que nos dan la vida, y porque para nosotros es muy importante el territorio.
Donc pour nous,
For us, climate change and the ice melting is not just a question of mountains, it's also a problem of our gods disappearing, because for us, the Uruiri are the gods who protect our people, who protect us and live in the mountains.
Somos pastores de llama, alpaca, somos también pescadores. Entonces, cuando se da el deshiele de nuestras montañas, también se da pues como que la pérdida de nuestras deidades, que afecta en la espiritualidad, que afecta en la razón de ser, diremos como aymaras, quechuas y pueblos indígenas.
nous sommes.
We are farmers. We're also herders. We take care of llamas and alpagas. We also fish, and the thawing of ice also causes spiritual problems for us, because when the water disappears, our protective deities will also disappear, and our reason for being will also be affected.
Nosotros como pastores de llama o como agricultores o pescadores, nos afecta el tema del agua porque dentro de nuestro pensamiento, de nuestra divinidad, de nuestra espiritualidad, el agua es como la sangre de la tierra, es como la sangre del cuerpo, y cuando nos desangramos, pues perdemos la vida. Lo mismo pasa con el agua en lo que es la madre tierra.
As herders, farmers, fishermen, we need water. And we also believe that water comes from the earth and defines our humanity. So it's as if we were bleeding to ourselves. When we lose the water, it's as if we were losing our own blood.
Las indígenas son las encargadas, por ejemplo, dentro de su cumplimiento de rol, son las encargadas de garantizar el bienestar, lo que nosotros decimos el sumacamaña, el buen vivir en los pueblos indígenas. Son estas autoridades también que tienen que, de alguna forma, garantizar la buena producción. Y la buena producción significa agua. Donde hay agua, hay buena producción. Donde hay agua, los animales tienen engorde, es decir, tienen buena alimentación. Donde hay agua, la vida para nosotros es alegre. Y cuando no hay agua, es pues la tristeza, porque nos vemos obligados a migrar a las ciudades.
We have an indigenous authority which is meant to protect the well-being of our people and monitor production, and that our harvest is successful so that we can live correctly. And we need water. We need water so that our animals be happy. We need water so that our animals can eat. And if we don't have water, we're very sad. And that sadness leads us to leave our territories and to move to cities.
Es como un ejemplo muy concreto, quizás ustedes pues conocen la ciudad de La Paz. Nosotros estamos rodeados por la montaña el Illimani, que es una isla. Isla es una protectora, el Illimani es el manto blanco porque es un nevado blanco. Entonces, su deshiele provoca de que realmente la sequedad también por el cambio climático, vemos la sequedad del agua, también los ojos de agua se van perdiendo también todo lo que significa la espiritualidad en relación al agua. Porque nuestras autoridades, por ejemplo, para tener agua, hacen la reproducción del agua trayendo las aguas de la parte del norte como las aguas de la parte del sur, y lo mezclan, son las autoridades tradicionales, lo mezclan para que el agua pueda reproducirse. Entonces, este ritual, por ejemplo, es de obligación para las autoridades el cumplir. Pero a pesar de eso, el cambio climático es tan fuerte que nos damos cuenta de que inclusive como la falta de agua, la pérdida del agua está provocando aquello que es la pérdida de la espiritualidad.
Donc, pour donner un exemple.
To give you a concrete example, you probably know the city of La Paz in Bolivia, and we have a mountain that's called Illimani near La Paz, and we call that mountain the island of abundance of water. and that mountain is drying up. The ice is thawing, and this causes droughts, and these droughts cause problems with our spirituality, because we have rituals where the authorities bring water from the north and the water from the south to guarantee the abundance of water. And that's something that's a tradition of ours. But with the climate change and the lack of water, this is creating problems with faith and spirituality. We no longer believe in what we believed in before.
De los pueblos cuando sufrimos de lo que es esta crisis climática, porque el deshiele es parte de lo que es el cambio climático, la crisis climática. ¿Cómo nos afecta? Prácticamente nos altera la vida, porque nos vemos obligados a migrar. Si, por ejemplo, donde hay agua, estoy pensando, por ejemplo, lo que hablábamos del Illimani, alrededor de los del Illimani, antes era verde. Inclusive las mujeres en Corquemarca, que es un pueblo indígena en Oruro, vi la pollera y el poncho de los hombres es de color verde. ¿Y por qué? En homenaje a lo que es o el símbolo o la representación, la imagen de lo que era verde. En cambio, como no hay agua, ahora se sufre la sequedad de los ojos de agua. El agua está desapareciendo. Y ¿quién sufre más? Es la mujer, porque al menos en la condición de llameras, pues hombres y mujeres se ven obligados a ir a lugares lejanos hasta que la llama pueda encontrar agua o pueda encontrar humedad para sus pezuñas, para su alimentación. Entonces, la importancia de lo que es el agua en la crianza de nuestros animales y también en la vida de los pueblos.
So that concrete impact, which causes the lack of water, also impacts our population because it causes migration. In addition, our traditional clothes in the population of Corquemarcar were traditionally green because the mountain vegetation was very green. And now, since everything is dried up, the green has disappeared. And the women who are the herders who take care of the llamas are forced to migrate with the animals in order to go and find water and to go and find enough food. And without water, they have to go further and further away from their original territories.
Ya voy a terminar. En los pueblos, por ejemplo, para nosotros el territorio, el bosque, la biodiversidad que existe, es como nuestro banco, porque comemos de ahí, nos alimentamos de ahí. Sin embargo, cuando vamos a la ciudad con lo que es la migración, todo es circulante monetario. La migración nos destruye porque dejamos de usar nuestra ropa tradicional, nos olvidamos del idioma y vamos a engrosar el sector informal del comercio, obligados a vender lo poco que uno puede tener. 10 naranjas, 5 limones, es irrisorio, pero nos vemos obligados a vender, porque como en la ciudad todo es dinero, en el campo no, uno va y recoge su sembradío y se alimenta.
So traditionally, we didn't need banks because our land it represented everything. We could go and gather whatever we needed, and we didn't need money. But now, if we have to migrate, if we have to move to cities, we will have to use the economic systems in cities. And we are also ashamed of our traditional clothing. We have to speak Spanish rather than our own languages. And we have to go to the cities and sell a few oranges and a few lemons. And we become people who sell little things in order to survive instead of living in our traditional way.
Thank you very much for a very moving and very strong testimony. Well, el agua es como la sangre de la tierra. La pérdida de la agua es como la pérdida de espiritualidad. Very strong sentences, very strong experience, and very grateful to you to have shared it with us. Now I am very honored also to welcome Vanina Ojeda. Vanina Ojeda comes from Ushuaia, the extreme south of Argentina, and she's a member of the people Selknam, a people native of Patagonia, and especially de las Islas de la Tierra de Fuego. She founded the Secretariat of Indigenous People of La Tierra de Fuego, and she's the chair of the movement Territorial and Cultural Harouen. So please, Vanina, thank you very much for having come from your country, your region, and please now share with us your testimony.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. La verdad que estoy emocionada de estar acá y poder hablar en nombre de mi pueblo. Un pueblo que seguramente ustedes lo conocen. Vengo de Ushuaia, o Llovia para nuestros hermanos Yaganes, Yámanas, Caruquinca para nuestros hermanos Cernanonas, que fueron vistos como sujetos suplidos al pasado o como que habíamos sido exterminados, y una historia tan triste. Y decir que también Ushuaia, Tierra del Fuego, en la parte de Argentina, es una de las provincias más jóvenes. Entonces, cuando tengo que hablar de cómo vivía mi pueblo, no tengo que ir muy lejos. Y de lo producto de lo que fue la colonización y el capitalismo, los cambios que fue obteniendo.
Bonsoir.
Good evening. It's with great emotion that I take the floor here to talk about my people. I also represent other peoples, the Yaganes and the Selkmen. We live in the Ushuaia region, which we called Shuaia. And it's funny to think that many people think my people belong to the past, that we've been exterminated, that we no longer live, but we're still alive and we still exist. We have history that was marked by colonization and capitalism.
El pueblo Cernan siempre fue un pueblo territorial, aún hoy en esta actualidad. Lo podemos decir que son guardianes del territorio, como nuestros hermanos Yaganes, guardianes del mar. Y de hecho son pueblos que han reivindicado de diferentes formas el cuidado de lo que es la naturaleza y la comunión con el ambiente, porque somos un pueblo que no hemos migrado, se nos mantenemos en nuestro Harouen, en nuestro territorio.
Donc mon peuple.
My people, the Segmal people, or the stewards of the land, and the Yaganes are the stewards of the sea. And we've always claimed that role
of stewardship to protect our territory, which is very important to us.
Con el sistema de mal llamado civilización o colonial, muchas de nuestras mujeres fueron, bueno, les prohibían hablar su lengua, como en el caso de mi bisabuela, de mi abuela y mi tatarabuela que fue asesinada también. Entonces, nos tuvimos que amoldar a vivir de otra manera, pero muchas siguen en el territorio y aún seguimos reivindicando cómo se podía vivir sin dañar la tierra nuestra. Entonces, de esa manera siempre ha costado, pero ha marcado una historia importante en Tierra del Fuego y en la Argentina, porque es uno de los pueblos que fue el primero reconocido como preexistente antes de la conformación del Estado argentino, producto de los genocidios, y que pudo recuperar parte de su territorio indígena que hoy lo conserva como natural, porque tenemos agua, tenemos turbas y pedimos que en Tierra del Fuego tantos lugares importantes puedan seguir conservándose.
Donc,
So what we called civilization, which, as you know, caused a lot of problems, because of this, our people were forbidden from speaking our own language, and many people, like my mom, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother, could not speak the language anymore. But despite everything, our people have continued to adapt, to protect and conserve our territory, because that's always been our main goal, to protect our territory. We are one of the first peoples that were recognized officially as being pre-existent to the creation of the Argentinian state, and we were able to get our land back, and we want to protect it.
La comunidad Rafaela Inston, porque así está nombrada nuestro pueblo, comunidad Rafaela Inston, por una mujer que fue la impulsora de la recuperación de las tierras, vive, son 8 familias que viven dentro del territorio y de que viven sin servicios, los servicios de derechos básicos, ¿no es cierto? Que muy poco se sabe de esto, ¿no? Por eso pedimos nosotros también de poder hacerlos partícipes y brindar herramientas para que ellos puedan conservar o volver a lo que es el hábito natural donde se podía cosechar, sembrar. Si bien tenemos mujeres que hoy hacen la recolección de juncos y van a encontrarse, porque bueno, pronto les enviaré aquí de Francia una cesta de junco milenaria hecha por una mujer nativa para que podamos mostrar lo que hoy hacen nuestras mujeres. Pero así todo tenemos hombres dentro del territorio que conservan lo que es la turba, la siembra de papa, el cuidado del agua, y tenemos otras luchas como también con organizaciones ambientalistas, que es importante mencionar, que hoy se declare la península Mitre como una reserva natural.
Donc, dans l'actualité.
So today in our community, we have formed a small community called Rafaela Inston. She was a woman, a pioneer woman in land conservation. And so this organization fights and works to conserve our traditions, and especially traditional communities who still cultivate and work the land, grow potatoes. And we want to show that we resist and we fight and struggle against the bad use of our land. Thank you.
Thank you for having come to us from Argentina and for having shared your fights. And I'm very grateful for your experience, your testimony, both of you. Unfortunately, we have been longer than allowed, and the next session is already waiting for the room, and so we have to end the session here. And thank you all for your attention and the speakers for their participation. Thank you.